hands. Welcome to the ASIFA Animation Stew panel. We want to find out a bit about y'all first. So, who is from here? Who is local? Raise your hand. And who is from out of town right now? That's like half. That's amazing. Now, this is an animation panel. We're going to talk about different forms of animation from the basic to the beginner, but is anyone already in the animation industry? We have animators in the house? Fantastic. Feel free to ask very complex questions to these people down here. And we're going to show you steps on how to make animations as well as show you the end product of what we did. My name is Jeanette Gregory. I'm the moderator, and I'm also on the board of ASIFA with these wonderful fellow animators. Well, I'm not an animator, fangirl. ASIFA is a 30-year-old organization that started in France. We are the Atlanta chapter. It stands for Association Internationale du Film d'Animation. You like that? ASIFA. So we're the Atlanta chapter of ASIFA. We, again, are the only ones in the South, and we program and offer unique animation screenings and educational programs all year long. So we were very excited to be invited to DragonCon to talk about animation. For this panel, we took everything we know about DIY animation, sent a DragonCon Mad Lib script to animation fans, and threw it all into one workshop. Watch the resulting animated short and learn the recipes to make your own. Do we want to introduce ourselves first or just watch? We're going to watch, and then we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to show it to you again so you can see the pieces that we delved into. Since we've got lighting, let's watch. So this is our end product that we will then dissect and talk about how we did this in series.
DragonCon Mad Lib. At the Georgia Aquarium night. See a tank of swimming
baboons.
Read the Daily Dragon. To avoid being the
Chuck Norris
at the
bronies
panel. Who
farted
upon entry. Cast
yo mama jokes
at the Harry Potter panels. Take lots of photographs, especially at the DragonCon parade. Good luck avoiding the
humping robot.
This has been an Animation Stew short presented by ASIFA Atlanta. Happy DragonCon.
Now we're going to dissect how we made that in a few weeks. Yeah, a few weeks. I'm going to introduce our panelists. To my right, your left. This is Fatima Abdullah. She is the president of ASIFA Atlanta. She really runs our show. Amazing. Next to her, this is Elisa Lewis. She is our VP of ASIFA. She's also an After Effects animator at Floyd County. To the right of her, we have Al Waller. He's an animation instructor at the Art Institute of Atlanta, as well as an animator, filmmaker, and an educator at Process 742 Media. I stole his bio offline, so I've got to check this as I go. And finally, Mike Dillard. He is one of our main animators for the Chuck Norris sequence, especially, and he's also an instructor at the Art Institute, correct?
No, Seville Studios.
Different studios, pardon me. So we've got a medley of different sources that we use for this panel, or for this animation. With that, we're going to break it down from chronological, how you start, what we ran into, what problems you hit, what you can try differently. So I'm going to kick it off to Fatima.
Sure.
Talk about pre-production and where you start.
Excuse me. So, thanks everybody for coming. I take it a lot of you guys want to know really cheap, do-it-yourself ways to do animation. So that's what we really focused on during the workshop. And so we kind of used a lot of handmade rigs where you're using multi-plane layers, and we built our own. So the most we spent on any one rig, which allows you to do multi-tiered shooting, is probably about $10. And that's just finding scrap wood, plexiglass, things like that. And since DragonCon wanted us to do a how-to workshop, we had to find a way to invite lots of people who don't necessarily know how to animate and provide a space and the equipment and do it. We did it in a one-day workshop. So everything you see was designed, talked about, written in one day, and then we kind of live shot it and then edited afterwards. So we didn't have a lot of time to conceive, which a lot of storytellers don't always. So those are the ways we're going to focus on how to talk about DIY. And Elisa is our VP and really good at corralling people. So she's going to talk about ways that you can kind of bring people to your cause if you're doing a short film about animation or animated.
Go ahead, yeah.
Hi, I'm Elisa, and let's talk about promotions when it comes to a short film. There are a lot of ways you can promote yourself. I would put a big star by having a great personality and being well with people around you, because they'll probably promote you more than you could ever promote yourself. In the case of this short, we used a lot of online social media like Facebook and Twitter and our own website, but word of mouth is a great way to get films like this out there.
I mostly stop motion animator. I also do traditional 2D flash animation a lot, but the dilemma or the problem that you kind of get set up with something like this is how to do something quickly. So we had to think of cheap and fast, and so a lot of cutout animation. The action figure played in well for this, so we were able to dress up the action figure. So really what it was about problem solving. We got in a room, we had the Mad Libs, and said, what can we make out of this? And in 6 hours, basically one afternoon, we started drawing characters and had to assign things really fast and put Harry Potter outfits on all these different action figures, and then shot it, and you have to kind of live with what you're able to create that day, which is a little different than most animation is created, because you have a very highly polished process, and we were doing it more like a slam type situation, which was a lot of fun. And it also kind of gives you a little bit more of a creative edge, in that you're forced into doing things quickly and fast, and it kind of makes you think of things in different ways. So it was a lot of fun to be in a room full of animators, and we were talking about animation while we were doing it, and a little bit of pressure, but we had a lot of fun doing it. So.
Yeah.
Well, the designing the character, even having that time crunch, it was actually quite fun to. Basically, you take reference of Chuck Norris, and then you realize, oh, I don't have to draw Chuck Norris, I can draw a fat guy in Chuck Norris costume. So I could really have fun with those shapes, with the shape of his body and the look of it. And then you would just take it and sort of, if you understand how he's built, all those round shapes, you just break it apart, and it's just like animating in Flash. And then even with the baboons and all that stuff, Bryant was the main one who was sort of handling that, and I sort of helped him out and advised him on how to break those characters apart and just separate those pieces. And then we had Lincoln, who designed the bronies. He's actually quite new. He's not really, he doesn't really know that much about animation, doesn't know that much about, art and all that stuff, but he is taking art history and everything like that. But he was brand new and trying to learn, and I just allowed him to design them in his own way. And then he designed them first as female characters, and then we thought, oh, why wouldn't this be funny with male characters as the bronies? And he did a really, really good job. So we basically all supported each other as one within that time crunch.
Well, let me ask you this, Fatima. Why, and I know the answer to this, so I'm leading her into, why did we choose a Mad Lib script?
Good question. DragonCon, because we're local, reached out to us very last minute, and we had about 40 hours to decide what this panel would be about. And so we thought about the best way to kind of create a script, which is really great going into a workshop environment, because if you have a short script, and I'm talking 5 or 6 lines, which is what you just saw, it's easy to divide each of those lines into a group or a sequence. So we wanted to do something where no matter how many people we had, whether we had 8 people or 15 people come to the workshop, we could easily divide them into these groups to work on each segment. So we did a Mad Lib script because, you know, it's Dragon Con, and the animators we were working with, it was pretty funny. Not a lot of them, you know, surprisingly know about Dragon Con. So there was even like a little period of 30 to 40 minutes where we had to research. I'm the Dragon Con fan. So I did my best to explain, but there was a lot of research involved just to get them up to par.
The good thing about stop motion is it's got a handmade feel to it already. So you get a little bit of wiggle room there. It's not like you're trying to create Pixar level animation. It's part of the aesthetic. So that was another reason to pick stop motion type of animation to do. So you can kind of create things and it naturally has more of a homemade feel to it. So if you're looking for an avenue to create some things where you're not having to feel like it has to be perfect, stop motion is a great place to do it. And it's a good place to start experimenting too. So we used a program called Stop Motion Pro. Relatively inexpensive if you're looking for a good program to use for stop motion. It's a good company of giving you tutorials, video tutorials to show you how to do it. You can eliminate rigs with it. It does have green screening capabilities and a lot of other things, and can shoot in high def. So it's a nice way of doing something low budget. And but that was one of the rigs. Another rig we used was one that you brought. You can kind of tell about how that was working.
That was actually a tabletop rig, and so the rig Al described, just to give you perspective, it looks like one of those science fair boards. So it's got the back and the front, except it's all wood. So it allows you to have a big kind of staging area. So the entire stop motion set is probably about the size of this table. So the one that I did, and it's also, just so you know, we shot on webcam, low res, just to be able to do it more quickly and preview and things like that. But the one that I built is, it's about half the size of the table, so it's meant to be able to fit next to your computer, so that you can just plug a webcam up, you know, and put it in your computer and capture footage right from your computer. So it's, you know, about this tall, and it has, you know, 4 legs, so it looks just like a tiny coffee table that's hollowed out. And to get the depth, you can put green screen right under the legs of the table. And to get the height, there's like a tabletop surface. I actually just picked up one of those IKEA frames that you can get for about $10, and took the frame off it, used the plexiglass, and put the plexiglass right on top of the table. So it really looks like a table. And then you can just put like a wooden arm on it to rig any kind of webcam to have a down pointing camera. So what I like to point out for especially kids who are learning how to animate is, even though we're looking at an image that's flat, obviously, and looking at it, you kind of want to think of animation as pointing down. So if you think about a traditional animation stand light box, you're probably used to seeing like the Disney characters, you know, drawn on the big circular motion. So that's traditional animation. Or stop motion, you can shoot it, you know, dead on in a very professional way. So like Leica Studios, you know, does 3D animation, and they're beautiful. So Coraline, you know, stop motion. But you can also actually point down to look at things like that. So, and that was all wood. So I think I spent about $9 or $10 on scrap wood and taught myself how to drill. And we made a few of them, so we traveled them around to different workshops. And all this information is also available online, asifa.com or -atlanta.com, if you want to check out how to build your own.
Another book I'd recommend too, if you're serious about trying to start with stop motion, is a book by Susanna Shaw. I think she's British, but it's a very good book. Focal Press puts it out. It will take you through everything from lighting to armature building if you're wanting to do 3D armature, the cheap armature and expensive armature. It'll show you a lot of tricks to do things. So it's a great medium to just kind of jump into. You don't have to buy a lot of extra stuff, but it gives you experience of experimenting with animation and creating some really cool things with it too. So.
And then we had one other method, rotoscoping. Did you work on that, Mike?
No, that was I can't remember. Is it Marcelo?
Yes.
Yeah, he worked on that. He actually did a very, very good job. Basically, you just took still images, and then he just traced those out with his own sort of inking style and inking look. I think the rougher it looks, the better and the more movement you guys get into it. But he did a very, very good job.
And the rotoscoping is that scene you saw where the parade scene where there are the people in the background walking. So that's a really, really fun way to learn how to think like an animator in that you're noticing very small movements. So what you can do is, try to use open source video that's available to the public. And usually you can just download those with a kind of a download app. And you export it as an image sequence. So you can even do this in iMovie or Premiere Pro is what I use. So you export it as an image sequence. If you download about 2 seconds, you're going to end up with about, hundreds of images. You can break down as many as you want and print those black and white or color. I recommend trying to download HD so you can get some detail. So then you just, trace them, as you were saying, on a light box. And those light boxes can vary with. We use really inexpensive light boxes. They're about $40. And, you just trace each and every image. And, the work you saw here, was obviously an illustrator, but I've worked with 6 or 7-year-olds who can actually just trace these images. And then you just scan them all in. And then you dump them in as an image sequence. And, export it as a video. So you're actually doing very little editing and relying heavily on the source. Another thing about source footage I should mention, some of the photos you saw were taken from Wiki Commons, which is open source. That's a great place to kind of download video or practice with any images that are free and open to public for use.
I'd add too on the rotoscoping, something else you can do that's kind of fun to do. Instead of just strictly tracing exactly what you see, you can take any person walking, any person doing an action, and then change the character design of it. You can take, instead of making it a stormtrooper, you could have made it a Harry Potter character or something. Now what that does is it relies on your skills as a draftsman. It relies on you being able to stay on model when you draw it. But if you're wanting to stretch your skills a little bit more, it's a good place to start the strict tracing, but then kind of push yourself and say, okay, instead of this being a walk cycle of a stormtrooper, I'm going to change it to Darth Vader. And then you can then you have to rely on your own skills of redrawing Darth Vader each time instead of just strictly tracing it. Yeah. So it's a great method to kind of get started, especially if you don't have any training in it yet. It's a good way to kind of get going.
To add to that, one of the techniques that Fatima spoke about was printing them out. If you don't have a printer and you want to save a few trees, what you can do is get your old TV and pull up your favorite movie, or if you have one of those fancy TVs that lets you play YouTube or whatever on it, put the paper right on the screen and then you can trace from there. When I pick out some of my favorite animations and I do that, it allows me to see how the animator is thinking, and I'll see some extreme poses that I would never have thought about. One film, The Road to Hidalgo, is my favorite, especially the sequence when they're finally getting into the city. If you have that movie or a chance to look at it, definitely look at those scenes and then try rotoscoping some of those just for practice. Even if you're not going to do it directly from the screen, you just want to draw it. Hit your pause, the forward button. Every few frames it'll go. It's perfect for that. You won't even have to set your keyframes. And see how those extremes go.
Yeah. And to add that, a good example of a rotoscope animator, obviously the Fleischer Brothers. You guys familiar with the Fleischer Brothers?
Okay.
Yeah.
For those who aren't, who are the Fleischer Brothers?
I don't. They're awesome. 1930s.
Yeah.
Circa 1930s.
This is the original Superman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coco the Clown, Betty Boop. They created these characters. And those are, the earliest forms of rotoscope, and really kind of drove the way it's created. And to go to Al's point, I show a lot of people those Coco the Clown and Betty Boop images, and they don't even realize that it's rotoscope because he just used it as a reference. And I'm trying to think of one in particular where he's animating a musician.
They actually invented the rotoscope machine.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
So check out the Fleischer Brothers for good examples of rotoscope because it doesn't get a whole lot better than that.
I'm going to bring us back to the processing. We went as far as we did our Mad Lib, we got our words, we got our script. we had our formats. We knew what we were capable of creating, a rotoscope, a cutout, a stop motion. We had the time and the capacity to do that. Then how did you then choose, okay, this is best for this format, and then go to the storyboarding? And so how did you take the ideas, and maybe what are some problems you thought of that this wouldn't work because of this, and how, again, we're thinking the easiest, quickest, most efficient, how did we get the formats to match up our script options and then move to storyboarding from there?
Well, one example is the rotoscoping. You don't want to have something that's going to be really long because drawing takes a long time. And so what is something that will cycle? Of course, the parade. You get a few characters. You can create a walk cycle of them over about 12 to 16 frames. Just roll that over and over, and then like Fatima did the editing, and she just layered it and put several of them in there and created this kind of artsy feel to it. So we knew immediately the parade would be a good place for the rotoscoping. The things that were more character-based, that we had to create the change of expression and stuff, the cutout animation would work for that. And then, I don't know, well, I think the reason why we chose the action figures for the Harry Potter was because we could put cheap robes on them and cover up. I mean, we had some really ugly action figures in there.
I think they were wrestling action.
Yeah, that and we had some other footage we didn't end up using. We shot some extra stuff that we kind of left out, but there was some big orc-looking characters and stuff that we dressed up. And the fun thing was cut out Harry Potter faces and Ron Weasley faces and just stuck them on there. So it gives you the movability of it without having to put a lot of extra work into it, you know. Now, if you're going to go all out and spend weeks on something, go all out and put more into it. But we purposely limited ourselves to a 6-hour period to see what we could come up with. And it's kind of like creating haiku. You ever written haiku before? You limit yourself to just these 7 syllables and 2 syllables and 5 syllables. You get more creative that way, and that's kind of what we were doing. We were limiting ourselves to see what we could squeeze out creatively. And it was a lot of fun to do it that way. So.
The Harry Potter robes, that was just an old black shirt.
Yeah.
So, haiku gun. So like just anything around the house you can probably create in stop motion. Where'd you guys get those wands?
We made them out of armature wire and black.
Electrical tape.
Yeah, electrical tape. Yeah. And I did want to add too, one part of the process that was real important for us, and it took about 10 minutes to do this. We had to assess who was in the room. I mean, because we didn't know who was showing up.
We did a call for volunteers, and we took registrations.
Right, and they did a quick bio of what they were into, but the great thing is they showed up with their demo reel, portfolio type stuff, said this is kind of what I do, this is what I do, and I already knew Mike, and I knew he was a good character designer, so I said, you do that. Show us what we need to do in the way of characters. And the other guys were more into the animation part, and some who were less experienced. It was a great feel because we had some of the more experienced animators taking on some of the guys who were just really wanting to get into it, more novices, and we're actually teaching in the moment. It was a lot of fun in that, and I love that experience. So if we get a chance to do more of that, it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the things that went wrong. Like, what are some of the... Let's talk the whole panel. But what did we run into? What did we not expect? What did we have to then fix? I think shooting was, well, we can talk about on-site, we ran out of time. We had 4 methods to start out with. We were going to do 4 lines. We saw 3, correct?
No, we were going to do 5 and went to 4, yeah.
So, what are snags that
some of them were
prevented?
Complexity of the pieces. You got to really keep it quite simple if you're going to do it very, very quickly. If you have more time, yeah, you can put as much detail into them as you want. The baboons took a little bit of time to actually color because he had a really good look for it, so he had to color all those, and he just did every stroke, and then we had to cut all those, and plus he didn't make them exactly big enough, so we had to work with those, the size. You want to do them big enough to where it's faster to cut out, and you can cut out a big chunk of it, and then go back and do the final little details real quickly. My character was about this big, so he was very easy, but then I ran into problems because I forgot some pieces, missed some facial expressions, so I actually had to grab a light box and trace over him and then draw a new head. So, I mean, it was pretty challenging, but fun.
in the baboon example. So I actually had to step out during the workshop. So as an editor, I wasn't able to say, this is what we should capture. So it was fun. It was fun. And so obviously there was some green in the baboon. So you kind of see where he was too transparent. When I was actually keying out the green, you just kind of lose a whole chunk of the fish. Luckily, it's kind of happening kind of fast. But so we had some green screen issues, and it wasn't a huge deal because again, we were working so quickly. And the point of the workshop was to teach. And so so where you kind of see some transparency issues with the character or that clouding around the character, those are actually just actual shadows that appeared on the green screen, that if I took them out anymore, if I keep them back anymore, and keying is really just like if you're adjusting the brightness contrast or the black and white scale. So it just makes it kind of transparent versus opaque. So if I would have taken any more of those shadows away, we would have been probably looking at ghosts more than we were now. So you kind of see those when we watch it again.
Yeah, the ideal situation is to test before you go. Is to sit down, set up the lighting, shoot 1 second of it, and see how it's going to work, and then go back and fix things. But we didn't have that luxury, so a lot of it was having to be done in the editing, and she did a great job of putting all that together. And one thing we didn't mention, we actually had a watercolor artist there that day. Loretta did a series of about 8 watercolors of the water for the aquarium, and we used that to just kind of loop that to create a sense of water movement in there. So we just took what we had. I kind of compare it to a found artist type of artist, someone who just grabs junk and makes things out of it. That's kind of the attitude we took at see what can we make to work for this format, and so the biggest issues were the things that come along in the technical end of stuff, and that's why testing and pre-production is so important, to check things as much as you can beforehand, and to make sure it's going to work, so you don't have those issues at the last minute.
I know for the green screen, I helped on the stop motion because I'm not an animator. I just had to help. In not having done one before, we didn't think about marking where our animation or where our characters were. So we were moving things all over the place. So that is definitely a lesson that we learned, as you have to keep in mind for the editor to put those pieces in the exact place that they were the time before. So much like the light box will hold your rotoscope image moving slightly, for stop motion we would make very big jumps and not realize that it didn't stay where it was supposed to be. I can definitely say we had a lot more footage than what they used because a lot of it they couldn't use. We tried to do some B-roll of, here's close-ups of the characters. We set them off thinking that they would sit to the side and it overlapped. So,
and that wasn't entirely, the jumping around. Sometimes in editing you can fix that. I actually couldn't find a source photo to match the angle that they captured. So when I saw the footage, if you kind of envision, a theater stage, they had a lot of floor space. So I had to find a photo that matched the same floor space and matched the scale of the characters. So when I went to add the extras, the Harry Potter extras, they just didn't fit that floor space. So they had to go. But it wasn't too much loss. But so it's kind of like challenging, working with a team, and I mean, these are some of the challenges of filmmaking, they're not just animation. Animation more so because you have to plan so much in advance. I think that's about the wrap on production. Let's start talking post and how we need to take everything that the workshop because we ran about an hour over on the workshop, so I can't say that we packed up the most efficient way we could have. So we probably handed Fatima a whole stack of papers that she then had questions about. Just starting with post, as far as editing, I know you're talking about scanning, you're talking about web cameras. What are some softwares that you would recommend starting with, or what are some of the kind of basic tools that you might need to capture this footage and then take it to the editing? To start, I got really great footage from Al because Al was the workshop leader, and so he compiled all the raw footage. So from him I received, the 8 separate aquarium images that were super high res. And I received the baboons, which were animated alone, so there was no background. So each baboon had their own image sequence that he thankfully edited into a video for me. And so I kind of first assessed it, you know, to get it all in, and then I ran through keying it out in After Effects. Anybody familiar with After Effects? Oh, heavens. Nobody got hurt. After Effects is great. And so I just keyed out all the green in there. And I won't go into too many technical details, but there are great how-to guides on YouTube just how to key out green. So then I just keyed all that stuff out. And I use Premiere Pro just because that's what I'm familiar with as an editor. And really just had to find the music that I had, you know, access to. So if you're trying to make your own animation and put it to the film circuit or film festival circuit, remember it has to be music that you have the rights to. So music for from Friends is great. I used music that my husband made when I think he was 18. So I knew I could use it. I had to find some source footage, so that, you know, took a little bit of time to hunt Wikimedia. So I spent about probably 10 hours just looking for music that would match, sound effects that would match, that were free. I just thought I wrote down that website. Shoot, that's how it is. And then I just kind of had to find the story. Luckily, we had a great storyboard. And so we had the general Mad Lib script, but I kind of had to change some, you know, prepositions around or the comma around so that it made sense verbally, or more sense. We wanted to communicate that it was a Mad Lib, so we threw the subtitles up there so you have time to kind of read what's happening. We chose to do the word bubbles separately, so we animated those separately. And we did word bubbles versus talking, because when you add talking to your own animation, that's a whole nother monster, and it's called lip flap. So then you have to ask your animators to make sound match the mouth movements. And what is that, like 8 general mouth shapes?
And that takes doing exposure sheets, and that's a whole, almost other complete set of things you got to do that we just didn't have time for.
Yeah, so we just try to keep it simple and just use word bubbles where we could. The voiceover you might recognize, that's just a generator, a robot generator voice program that I found. Typed it in. I used a free trial, so I had so many shots at recording it. And give me a second to think. I'll have to look it up. I'll post it on the website. I'll post all this on the website again. But so I just downloaded a voice generator with a free trial where you can type to text and you can change the pitch and the audio. Probably wasted too much time doing that. That was really fun. And then another trick. So I actually ran out of options, exports, when I was actually editing. So I used a friend's computer, downloaded another trial to do the final pass. So, you know, always reach out to your friends and family when you're doing free stuff. So that was the voiceover. And then I just kind of laid down an audio track for the voiceover. Music was a separate track, and then the sound effects was a few layers. But, you know, it was basically a compositing exercise. And, you know, if you have artistic friends, it's really fun to do these things together, and they're usually willing to do it. So this 2-minute animation took us about, you know, 2.5 weeks to produce. So, yeah, there's no reason to try not to animate at home. And a lot of you guys are local, and a lot of you are from out of town, and there are about 6 nationwide ASIFA chapters who do what we do. So, you know, check out ASIFA East, which is ASIFA New York and kind of the East Coast, ASIFA Hollywood, I'm sure you're familiar with, the Annie Awards, ASIFA Colorado. There are lots of places that you can kind of reach out for resources if you're not fortunate enough to be in Atlanta, where we are. Yeah.
Talking technical specs, as animators, what kind of minimum computers do we need to deal with here? What kind of hard drive storage? What kind of basic? I mean, let's not get too fancy, but what are the minimums for your technical?
I'll brag on this. I've got an old Gateway computer that's 10 years old that I used to shoot some of this stuff this last week, and so it's still holding up. So you can do it pretty minimally. You don't have to have a lot of hardware to create something like this. I don't know exactly what it takes. I just know what works and what doesn't work. You know. So.
If you can run a basic editing program, you know, whatever a basic editing program runs on and that's probably just a standard computer that you're buying now. They're just made to build video processors.
Okay.
So So your basic stuff, I would recommend a passport because with animation you're actually dealing with a lot of high-res images. So that's the biggest challenge is where to store all those images. And if you're working on a network at home, that slows down your editing time. So your computer's having to process from the sky versus locally. So try to have it on a hard drive or on your machine versus working on a network. But I don't think there are any super fancy tech requirements that you might have.
But for the cameras and the scanning as well.
Well,
How did we do
you were about to say something.
Sorry, I was.
That's all right.
So, I think when you're making an animation and you're considering how much it'll cost you should really consider what your goal is. As an experimental animator, I really think about what I'm trying to get across. A lot of times it's just the process. And if your intention is just to see if something you're thinking about will work, maybe a trick or something you saw around the house you think could make a nice storytelling method, I think you should really place that over the overall aesthetic. And if you do that, you can cut your cost significantly. But if your goal is to make something that looks like a DreamWorks picture or something like that, well then you may have to shoot a little bit higher or get really creative. Right now, there are a lot of social media pictures and videos that are going on. I just got hooked on Best Finds. Have you guys seen that? Best Finds? Little clips from the internet. Finds?
Yeah.
Yeah, Best Finds. You know the jumping pictures that people take? They take a picture and they're jumping. I've seen so many people start animating with those pictures, and these animations are stuck on their camera. They can offload it and they've got an animation ready to go. They can add little things in it. But you could use whatever you want to use. Just remember what your goal is. If it's just to tell a story, don't get tied up in the aesthetics. If it's just to try a technique out, don't get caught up in how it's going to look in editing. But if you're trying to make something fancy, then you may have to get some fancy stuff.
Or just to add one point, if you're trying to get other people to work on your story and you want to show them what it looks like, you can do it the cheap way first. Kind of, do a scene or two, animate a scene or two, and then, get buy-in to go to the next level. So kind of start small, test out your ideas, see if it's even a good story on the screen, and then, take it to your friends and say, hey, I want to up this.
Yeah, and quick show of hands, how many of you are interested in actually creating stop motion on your own and you're looking for information? Okay, all right. A good place to start, there's a free program that'll shoot at like 420 resolution on a webcam. It's called Jellycam, of all things. You can download it for free. It's easy. I get a lot of classes where I teach 9 and 10-year-olds how to do animation and say, go home, get your parents to download this and you can use your webcam. And it's a great tool to make things come to life. And so it's a good place to start. There are other programs. The one that has kind of become dominant these days is Stop Motion Pro, and they start down at the low end of about $50 and go up to about $200. So, but that's to shoot high def and all the other stuff that you're needing to do. Yes, sir.
If you already have Photoshop, does that make sense?
I've never used Photoshop to shoot animation. Have you?
I have.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Or scan it, or just manipulate images.
Yeah.
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 Using Stop Motion Pro, how much of that is, as far as like your character animation and rigging, do you do that all by hand, or does Stop Motion Pro help you? Is it just like sequencing your frames, or do you do any rigging and character animation using that program?
Yeah, it's not like Maya or something where it'll tween things for you. It's still hands-on. You're doing everything yourself. What it gives you tools to do that if you have a rig, it has a sweep that you can do across, and it will take that rig out for you, which is great. It's because used to what you had to do, you had to hide the rig somehow.
Yeah.
And but it's got a great tool for doing that. It's good for the chroma keying. It has some functions there. But the good thing that I liked about them was that they have really good tutorials. And I think it's an Australian company or something, but they have great tutorials to show you how to do what you need to do. And you can also hook your Canon or Nikon DSLR to it, and it will shoot high def for you. I've done some professional work with the Stop Motion Pro and a nice Canon DSLR camera. So I don't know. Did you want to open it up to questions yet, or
I
did
was trying to check the time again.
In 30 minutes. Oh.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Could you use Flash as like Adobe Flash, like as a starting point, or what do you? Do you guys use Flash in any of your projects?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do traditional animation in Flash. It's the same concept of cutting out type things. You can do frame by frame, hand drawn, really nice, really well animated stuff in Flash too, but it's also great for doing cutout type. If you're going to do stop motion in Flash, what you still have to do is capture the images like with a digital camera. Then you take that sequence of images and you import it. And the good thing about Flash is if you go to import the first one, you click on the first image and then it'll say, this looks like a sequence. Do you want to put the whole sequence in? And then you'll say yes, and it'll run everything on its own frame. And so you're not having to put all these individual pictures in there. It's basically like dropping an animation in there. And then you can tweak it by putting hold frames and things and put them in different places. So yes, it.
If you're, and I'm asking a question as a moderator, how can lighting be a challenge? How do you need to consider if you're lighting your room versus outdoor natural lighting? What are some strategies there?
I think that goes back to what Elisa was saying about your what your purpose is. If your aesthetic is just to kind of test out and to see things move, lighting's not as big a deal. And if I'm doing like a workshop or a class, I don't worry too much about lighting. But if I'm doing some of more of my professional stuff, I actually go to where my brother is. He's the technical guy, and he has a green screen studio, and we actually spend a few hours just doing the lighting, because that's so crucial. If you're going to do something that has to work that way, you can't mess that up. So it really depends on what you want to do. The thing I like about stop motion is it's got a natural handmade feel to it already. So if you cheat a little bit, it's okay.
Yeah. If you're doing it at home, what you want to keep away from is fluorescent lighting. So the controlled lighting that Al's talking about is you're in a dark room and you have clamp lights. And we were in an office, so we used a few desk lights, to light it. But you want a nice even backing. So if you're in these conference rooms, you can kind of see where the shadow is dropping on the wall. You want that just all to be white, no shadows. It's kind of the ideal that you're going for, in case you're experimenting with shadows. But you want to stay away from lights like this, because you might not see it now, but when you go to shoot it, it's flickering.
Yeah.
So, and you'll see some of that flicker in the short. So it's just like from every frame, the lighting is different. So when you're watching an animation, you see that flicker effect. So if you're at home, you want to go into a dark room with no windows and try to light your green screen with all kinds of lamps and lights. It's going to get hot, get fans. But just get a nice even background and a nice even floor space. So you're not, you either have very sharp shadows or no shadows at all.
To add to that, wear black. Please wear black. The colors on your shirts and on your pants will reflect onto your objects, and you'll see it later on.
Yeah.
Not just that, but your shadow will play in there sometimes. You'll go in, you'll manipulate the puppet, you'll step back and you think, I'm out of the shot, I'm safe, but then when you go to run, suddenly you see this dark thing doing this in and out. And you got to be careful of that, because it does show up, and you just spent 3 hours shooting a segment, Before stop motion got digital, everything was in the camera, and you didn't know what you shot until it had been developed at the end of the day, and then you go, oh crap.
Yeah.
But now, with even the simplest, cheapest software, you can watch it while you're shooting it. You can check and make sure you're not screwing things up. So someone made the comment that they thought stop motion was dead or it was dying. It's not. It's actually becoming better and stronger because of the digital aspect. In fact, I like pointing this out. Some people who talk to me a lot hear this way too many times. Last year, out of the 5 films that were nominated for Best Animated Film, 3 of them were stop motion films, and only one was, and the other 2 were the CG stuff. Okay, so it is an art form that is very valid, and it's getting even stronger and better as time goes by because of the tools that we have. So.
Question? Yes, sir.
One of my fondest memories is a claymation Christmas.
Yeah. The waffling and wassailing.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And they haven't shown it recently, but I hope they bring it back.
Yeah.
For people who want to do some things with basic claymation, not the sophisticated stuff, do you have any additional suggestions or thoughts to share?
Use a good oil-based clay. They call it in Great Britain plasticine. It's not even called clay, but Van Aken, I think, is the name of the company. If you just want to experiment, just get you some Play-Doh and just see what happens. But if you want something that's going to hold its form and work well, the Van Aken stuff is the best. So I would go with something like that.
Yeah.
I would say consider your environment when you're working with clay, because it tends to move things. And if you ever are able to go back and reshoot something, you definitely need to think about what's being moved or what's being pulled, or even when you're going ahead in animation. I remember doing an environment where there was grass, and the clay would pull out all the grass. So I would definitely think about what you're putting it on.
And the lighting will affect that oil-based clay too. If it's under the lighting for too long, it'll melt. I mean, it'll get gooey and a little bit yucky. So that'll affect it.
Question? Go ahead.
I've only used Blender for like animation. What would you suggest after that once I get more familiar with it?
The question was about Blender.
Program.
Heard about it.
I haven't used Blender yet, to be honest.
I've used Blender a little bit, but I wouldn't say there is a step after Blender. It's just where you feel comfortable.
Okay.
Because there are so many programs that you can use for animation, and when I first started animating, I was using MS Paint. So you can use whatever you want to use, and I've seen some beautiful MS Paint ones and some Excel ones.
Oh, that was funny. Yeah.
I did a workshop on
Yeah.
Excel animation.
Yeah.
With Microsoft Excel, we have a treasurer who does amazing animations with it.
He's an accountant, by the way.
He's
And he teaches animation using Microsoft Excel. It's the craziest thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's no real program for you to use after it. I would say just play around, and whatever you have access to, that's what you should use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the price expensive programs. I mean, sometimes it's the cheap programs that have the better, I guess, better feel, more fun to it, more realism. I don't know, adding money to it doesn't always give it life. So it's sort of, just use what you can get your hands on.
I think Adult Swim.
Yeah, and another thing to consider when you are considering production, what is your purpose? Do you want to tell a story? Do you want to make people laugh? Do you want to experiment with the art? That's really 3 ways to go. If you want to tell a story, be a good storyteller. Make sure that is solid before you do anything else. If you want to tell good gags, make sure the gags work. Storyboard them out and even show them to people. Do they work as a comic strip almost? Do people catch the timing of it? But if you're just wanting to experiment with the art and be very artistic with it, that you just kind of go where you want to with it. And that, in any of those cases, it's not the program you use. In fact, I had an instructor years ago who was teaching. She taught animation, and she said, and it was when the movie Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within came out. Okay. The hype was that this program was so incredible. You saw the hair move, you saw the pores in the skin. It was supposed to be this cutting edge thing, and everybody was just blown away by it. The thing is, we went and saw it, and everybody went out going, "Oh God!" You know, it just I don't know what you felt about it, but it was the program didn't make it. Okay, she said. Now, in November or December, they're going to show the stop motion Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And how old is that thing? It's 50 or 60 years old, and we watch it every single year. It has affected generations of people. It's cheap animation, relatively cheap animation, and it blows that thing away, and it was done at a small portion of the cost of that high-end software. So it's really about the core, and the core is it story? Is it jokes? Is it artistic? And that's what you've got to ask yourself. It's not really about the program that you want to use. So.
I was just going to mention about just like cheap animation software. I don't know if you guys have seen the new app for the Disney release recently.
I've heard about it.
Yeah. Vault, and they have a bunch of like little programs, and they have a 3D rig with an LP that has the entire skeleton. You can move her around. They have a little bouncy mold thing that you can do. Yeah, so it's a good resource. Awesome.
That was using a Disney app as a resource, just in case it made use. Look for that in your app store.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I was going to throw a question out there. Oh, sir, in the back, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we
Yeah,
definitely
minutes.
are. We're going to end with it. We can do it in some more questions.
Sure.
Well, I want to throw my question out before I forget. So, let's say these folks have nothing at home, they want to go to the store and start getting things to do something. We all think that, okay, we should go to our fancy art store and buy our fancy colored pencils. Like, where can you cut corners as far as your tools, your pencils, your colors, where do you need to spend the money?
Well,
and where can you get by with crayons from the junk drawer?
as in for materials to create actual model type stuff, yeah, I'd use whatever you got around the house, because you really just want to get your feet wet. Because here's the thing. The minute you make something move, your life changes, okay? You can sit there, and the thing about animation, you work on one frame after another, and you're toiling away at it, but the minute you press play, and you see this thing start moving around, you go, oh wow, that's really cool. So that moment is what gets you motivated and going. So I would just figure out something that you feel comfortable using, already have, and feel comfortable using. Download the free software, get your webcam. We use $30 webcams to shoot this, honestly. Now it shoots at 720 resolution, so they were good enough. You don't have to spend a lot of money these days. I started teaching animation to 9 and 10-year-olds about 10 years ago, and I had to bring in big equipment. Now they come in with equipment. They come in with their DS, and they've shot Lego stuff. And I'm like, all right, you're already doing it. You know, I'll get you over here. So the tools are cheap and easy, but the thing is, the feeling you get of animate means to bring something to life. That's what it's all about. And I encourage you just to get in there and do it. Have some fun with it.
Food, whatever you have a surplus of, rice, beans.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of how I started. Just anything you have a surplus of at home. I've even done like experiments with just clothes coming to life. So your wardrobe. Usually it's good to have doubles in case you spill something, break something. So if you have, identical items of a lot of stuff, Home Depot, Lowe's are great for that. They just have lots of tools and things that cost 10 cents a piece, bolts, things that just are multiply, and there are just lots of, and I don't know worry at all.
To piggyback on what Al said, definitely see what you have at home first. Before you decide that it's time for me to go out and be a real animator, check your resources in your community as well. For people who are going to school, I didn't get a Cintiq when I was in school because I already had Cintiqs at school. If your friend has a Cintiq, maybe you can hang out with your friend a little more. If there's a library, see what the library has. And if there's a university near you and you're not attending, see if they offer like shadow work. You can come in and help a student. Helping a student on their project, let me tell you, put a star by that, is the #1 way for you to get access to everything in school. If you know someone who's going to a school, help them. Maybe you're not working on your project right now, but you'll get a chance to work on your things. And I think saving yourself, a few 20 grand or so is worth it.
So?
Yeah, to me it's like creating Frankenstein. You have all these pieces that you bring together. You have no idea if it's gonna destroy the village next door, but when you have the end result and you see it, it's your Frankenstein. It's your piece. It's your beauty. And it doesn't matter how you got there. It's fun. You had a great time doing it. So.
Do you want one more before
I'm
we
so
start?
sorry. Yes, ma'am.
I know you're fine. I was gonna ask, I know you do a lot of stop motion and 2D animation, but you mentioned, I heard you mention Maya and talk about Blender. Have you as a group created anything in a 3D program?
I haven't been involved with it, but
I have. In 24-hour challenges, I have.
Yeah. For Generate?
Yeah, for Generate.
I've been in those.
Yeah. Those are great.
Yeah, they're fun.
What were you asking about it? Well, we have done it. So.
Right. But I was just asking, like, as a group.
Has ASIFA done 3D workshops? We have not, and one of those important things is, we just want everybody to be able to touch what it is. So, we're looking for ways to get lots of computers to do that. That is one thing we're a little bit limited on, but we know somebody can touch.
Any final questions? I'm trying to work through to see what time it is, but I think we're just about wrapped.
Yeah.
Can we come up and ask questions?
Oh yeah, definitely, please. We've got about a half an hour in between, so if you have personal questions, try to approach the panel. They seem very friendly. So
how personal?
you can bring like specific questions up. If you have general questions, we can answer them as a group. But otherwise, we will thank you so much for coming to our panel. Thank you so much. Enjoy your dragon con.
Okay, great.